So now that we have our player object in our game, let's add an enemy object to our game. So the first thing we want to do is draw that enemy object. We can make him be a rectangle at first, and just like how we changed the player object to a better player, we can change our enemy later also. But let's get him working in our code first. So we'll change him to a symbol, so F8, or right click, and change him to enemy and export for ActionScript, and we'll press OK, and there's our enemy object. Alright, so now we'd like to add him through our code, so we'll delete his instance from the stage. He's not deleted from our library. And we can add him as an instance here. Later on we'll be making a vector of our enemies because we're going to need quite a few enemy objects. So we'll make our enemy of type enemy. We'll declare him with our instance variables. And then down here in our constructor, we will construct him or instantiate him as a new enemy object, calling that constructor. And then we'll add him to the stage. Alright, we will need to change his X and Y values. But let's go ahead and run him and make sure that he works. So we'll hit Control Enter. And we forgot something in our code. Oh, we forgot the new operator. So when we go ahead and run this code, we can see that the code does add our enemy object to the 0, 0 part of our stage. Now we'd like this enemy object to appear different places on our stage. We don't want it to always end up at 0, 0. And so far when we change the X and Y values of our objects, we went ahead and changed them with changing the X value and the Y value this way. But I'm going to show you a different way to kind of modify our enemy objects so that when we start adding enemies to our stage, they don't all appear at the same position. Because we're going to have to add more than one of these enemies, and we need a way to do that. So we're going to come over here to our enemy, or to our flaw file. We'll click on our enemy. We're going to right click. We're going to go to his properties. And notice before we kind of took it for granted that this class for all of our movie clip objects was automatically created, this ActionScript class. So if we want to edit this class, we can click on the little pencil icon here, tell it that we want to edit in Flash Professional, and we can edit that class. So here's my enemy class. I've already actually started editing it. When you look at your code, it should look like this without the code here inside of it. Okay, so I've already started editing mine, that's why I have code in here. Alright, so when we call our constructor, this constructor, whenever we make a new enemy object, this constructor is called. So to see how this works, go ahead and write x equals 100 and y equals negative 30. Or actually, let's say y equals 300. We'll make them appear in the middle of our stage. So this is our constructor. Every time that we make a new object of type enemy, this constructor is called. So this code is run every time we make a new enemy object. To see that this works, I can go ahead and run, and you can see that yes, his X and Y values did change according to that constructor. So what we would like to do is we'd like to make a new constructor. And this new constructor is going to look like this. So you can modify your constructor or write a new constructor inside of this class. And inside of this constructor, we're going to take two parameters. The parameters are going to be where his X position is going to be and where his Y position is going to be. So we're going to pass to it its X and Y position, and then set that enemy object's X and Y values to these X and Y positions. So this is our new constructor. So over here inside of our avoidergame.as file, this constructor now takes two values. The first value is its X value, comma, and then its Y value. We can see that this works if I run this code. His X and Y values are passed into the constructor, and they're changed when he's added to the stage. Remember, to get to that enemy.as file, you go over to your flaw file, and go to your properties, and you click on that little pencil icon and press OK, and you'll make sure that you have the right file open. You can see that this file, when you go to save it, is saved in the same location as everything else. So it's saved in that folder, Avoider Game. Alright, now let's write another function inside of our enemy.as file. Let's write this function here called move down a bit. This function is a public function. I named it move down a bit. It has no parameters, but you still have to put the parentheses. And its return type is void, meaning that it returns nothing. In the move down a bit function, we're going to say y equals y plus 0.8. In other words, we're going to add 0.8 pixels every time this function is called to the enemy object that's calling this function. Okay, so write this function inside of your class. It comes after the constructor but before the end of your class. Remember that this is the end of the class and this is the end of your package. So in my flaw file, on the enter frame event, this is the end of my enter frame event. Outside of this code, this was the code that we used to animate our player object. Now let's move our enemy. So we'll take that enemy object, I named him enemy, and I'll put a dot, so now he can call that method. The method I called, or created, was called move down a bit. It took in no parameters, so I just put the parentheses, and I just call him. So every time if they enter the frame, so 24 times a second, we'll call this function, and this function tells our Y value to increase by 0.8. So let's start him outside of the stage. Well, let's just leave him there for now. We'll just test it. So we'll control enter. You can see that he does move down. Moves down the stage. So what I'd like to do is I'd like our enemy object to appear outside of the stage. So if I make his Y value, let's say like -15, then when he appears, he'll be outside of the stage, and then he'll slowly move down into the stage, coming to get our player. So remember what's happening. We create this enemy with this constructor now. And in our enter frame event, we're calling that move down a bit function. Our player is calling that, and he's moving down the stage. Okay, when we want to make a new enemy, okay, this isn't the proper way to make new enemies, but I just want to show you that we can make another enemy, call him enemy 2. He's of type enemy. And I could copy and paste this code just to show you. We'll call him enemy 2. Add child enemy 2. We can have him appear somewhere else on our stage. So x equals 400 and our y value is still -15. And then we can copy and paste this code to see that our enemy 2 can now move down a bit. Now this isn't the best way to program this, and the reason that this isn't the best way to program this, if we want more than, let's say, 5 enemies or even 2 enemies, we're starting to get quite a bit of variables here. We don't want to copy and paste this code 10, 100 times. We want 100 enemies. So what we're going to learn in the next video is how to make a vector of our enemies, vector of enemy object, which is like an array. And that vector of enemy objects will keep track of all of our enemies coming down from the stage. Now something that you could work on is, in the next video, how to update your enemy object. Now you would update your enemy object the same way that you updated your player object. So you would double click on your enemy. So you know you're editing your enemy object inside of your flaw file. You could delete him. And then you could draw a new enemy object inside of here. So I could, use my drawing tools and make kind of like a flying saucer-like enemy object, Or I can do like I did with my player object. If I animate, let's say we want the girl to be the enemy object, I could copy her, come over to my avoider game.flaw file, go back to scene 1. I could rename this guy enemy 2, rename his name and his class name. I could then paste my girl object. So if I copied this object, this movie clip object, I could paste her in here. Then I could change her name to enemy. And now, when I run this code, you can see my enemies are now my girl object. So before you go on to the next video, go ahead and change your enemy object to be a better looking enemy object. And I will see you in the next video.